The Russian Federation has officially withdrawn from the negotiations to end the war in Ukraine today, and President Volodymyr Zelensky called on NATO allies to send more weapons and air defense systems to Ukraine, as he predicts that the war will continue at least until next year. Today, Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov publicly stated that continuing trilateral negotiations in the US-Ukraine-Russia format is not advisable until Kyiv withdraws Ukrainian troops from the part of Donbas it controls. Meanwhile, NATO acknowledged that at the summit in Yerevan this week, Zelensky warned NATO allies that the war will last a long time and they need to be prepared to increase arms supplies to Ukraine. But against this backdrop, unexpectedly, Ukraine's chief negotiator Rustem Umerov will travel to Miami this week to meet with Trump's special envoy Stephen Witkoff. While peace talks, as we can see, have reached a dead end. And it's interesting what will be discussed there. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. This really helps a lot in promoting content on YouTube. I would be grateful to you for that. So today, the Kremlin publicly refused to continue negotiations mediated by the United States of America to end Russia's war against Ukraine. The continuation of trilateral negotiations in the US-Ukraine-Russia format is not advisable until Kyiv withdraws its troops from the part of Donbas it controls. This was stated by the aide to the Russian dictator Yuri Ushakov. I will quote him next. Everyone understands, including, I would say, the Ukrainian negotiators, that now Kyiv needs to take just one serious step, after which, first of all, military actions will be suspended, and secondly, there will be an opening for serious discussion of a further long-term settlement. And on that same day, Kremlin representative Dmitry Peskov stated that Ukraine must withdraw its troops from Donbas in order to continue negotiations. So now they are making this not a condition for ending the war, but a condition for starting negotiations to resolve the conflict. Let me remind you, several rounds of trilateral peace talks on Ukraine took place in Geneva in February of this year. The next meeting in March did not take place because of the start of the US and Israel operation against Iran. And now, according to Ushakov, after the Geneva discussions, there have been no further contacts on Ukraine in this format. According to him, Washington is occupied with another quite serious and important issue. And after the February meetings, representatives of the Kremlin reported that Moscow was ready to withdraw from the negotiation process if its demands were not met. What those demands meant was territorial concessions by Ukraine, since almost all other issues have already been resolved. And this is where things get really interesting. The Russians are demanding that Kyiv sign a preliminary agreement, a commitment to withdraw troops from Donbas, after which the Kremlin will supposedly be ready for a meeting between the presidents of Russia and Ukraine to confirm the agreement, and then a mutual withdrawal of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and Ukraine should take place. According to Vladimir Putin's plan, the Ukrainians are supposed to leave Donbas, and the Russians promise to withdraw troops from the occupied areas of Sumy, Kharkiv, and Dnipropetrovsk regions. They will not claim the transfer of other territories in the Kherson and Zaporizhia regions to the Kremlin. But it is already obvious that Ukraine will not agree to this, at least until it receives real security guarantees. And now Bloomberg agency admits that Volodymyr Zelensky has asked Western countries to speed up the delivery of air defense systems and interceptor missiles to prepare for the next winter, when Ukraine expects the intensity to resume of attacks on cities and energy facilities. Clean Russians. This issue was raised during the negotiations, the inability of the equipment, with European leaders and the NATO Secretary General at the European Political Community Summit in Yerevan earlier this week. In Kyiv, they are striving to prepare the winter defense in advance. And Zelensky said, quote, "We need to think about what we will do if Russia does not stop this war. We need to help each other prepare for winter and solve energy problems." On the other hand, more and more experts are convinced that Vladimir Putin has lost the initiative and is unable to lead this wild country, that is Russia, to the long-promised victory. They say the turning point was a series of Ukrainian attacks on the oil refinery and the port of Tuapse, which led to massive pollution, not only in the city itself and the nearby waters of the Black Sea, but also in neighboring regions where popular tourist resorts are located. And that's when, supposedly after all this, the political elites in Moscow realized that there would no longer be a victory in the way the bloody dictator Vladimir Putin had presented it to everyone. Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory are becoming increasingly large-scale, frequent, and importantly destructive. And now, about 70% of Russia's population is already within the range of Ukrainian drone and missile strikes. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine have begun actively bombing Russian oil refineries and oil-exporting ports. Since last August, the winter has been marked by massive shelling of Ukraine with modified Russian missiles and drones. Moreover, Zelensky in Yerevan informed his allies that he expects a new Russian offensive this summer. So far, however, they have not been able to advance and have started losing the occupied territories. But due to the delay in peace negotiations, Putin is likely counting on Kyiv losing new supplies of Patriot systems and missiles because of the war in the Middle East, which are the most effective means of countering Russian ballistic missiles. That is why the Kremlin will focus on shelling specifically in the coming winter. That is why Volodymyr Zelensky in Yerevan asked partners to continue funding the Priority Needs List program for Ukraine, or as it is called, PEARL. Under this program, NATO countries, primarily European ones, purchase American weapons for Ukraine. A special emphasis needs to be placed specifically on Patriot systems to get them as quickly as possible, Zelensky stated. In addition, Kyiv is now trying to pursue a separate negotiation track with Washington. And now Ukraine's chief negotiator Rustem Umerov will travel to Miami this week to meet with Trump's special envoy Stephen Wilhelm, while peace talks have reached a deadlock. Therefore, there is a possibility that either Umerov is bringing an agreement to surrender Ukrainian territories, or a completely different issue is being discussed. And here it is worth noting an unusual event in recent days. Yesterday, on May 6th, the U.S. State Department approved the sale of 1,532 JDAM-ER guided aerial bombs to Ukraine for almost $400 million under the FMS program. And here's what's important. The FMS program is a separate program, I emphasize, for the direct sale of weapons. This is not PEARL. Here, the supplies are managed by the U.S. State Department, not by Europeans who buy weapons for Ukraine. So, as they say, things are finally moving, because the State Department has begun approving direct arms deliveries from the US to Ukraine. Not through Europe, not through NATO, not through intermediaries, but direct deliveries. For now, of course, it's just 1,500 aerial bombs. Not that many in the context of this war, but nevertheless, as they say, the precedent has been set. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would appreciate it. You can do this by donating through the links and details provided in the description of this video. Choose any format that's convenient for you. I would appreciate your support. Or you can scan the QR code on your screens. This is the easiest way to support the work of this channel. And subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link is also in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.